Welcome back to another episode of the Rest Revolution special series of the podcast in celebration of my new book, The Rest Revolution: How to Reclaim Your Rhythm and Conquer Burnout When Overworking Has Become the Norm. I am over the moon excited today because I have an interview with you that I'm going to share with you. And it is a fantastic woman who has inspired me over the years and who I think has a lot of insights to share with us about overcoming burnout, recentering ourselves, getting our nervous systems back on track, and all of the things. She's Natalie MacNeil. She's amazing. And I know you're going to love this interview. So welcome, Natalie.
Amanda, thank you so much for having me. And I just want to take a moment to celebrate you, to celebrate this book. I know that so many people are going to be able to transform their relationship to work and to rest through this book. And I just loved it. I think it's such an incredible book, and I'm so excited for it to get into so many hands. So I just wanted to take a moment to celebrate that as well. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Natalie. And thank you for being an early reader of The Rest Revolution and offering your endorsement and just giving it the time of a read. I think your perspective is incredibly invaluable. I keep saying that. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell people who you are? You have such an interesting background, an interesting past, and an interesting present, and assuming future too, because you are a futurist. So tell us who you are professionally in this moment and what you do.
Ooh, I love that you said, who are you professionally in this moment? Because I have had so many different iterations of my career, and my work has taken so many twists and turns that are often really unexpected. It's like you start out in a career and you have a sense of where you might be going, but then oftentimes I feel like you end up somewhere so different than you thought. Like where I am today is not where I expected to be, but I'm someone who is always in deep listening around what is most true and what's coming through me to be shared. So in this particular moment, I'm really focused on my work as a futurist. And my work as a futurist is also at the intersection of a lot of different things because I am very attuned to the future and to trends. I always have been. I've always been a pioneer in the industries that I have been in throughout my career. So I've always been ahead of the curve. And I used to think that that was a cool thing that I had access to that allowed me to build these successful companies. But in this moment, and especially over the last 2 years or so, I've really recognized that this is the deeper gift for me to be sharing. And so my perspective of the future is also deeply rooted in embodiment practice, in nervous system regulation work. And I feel like a lot of us have been called to do that work. A lot of us have been called to embodiment work and to healing work to prepare us for the radical changes that are coming over the next decade, to every industry, to every career, to every system, to pretty much everything that has been built in this world. Everything is about to change because of AI and other technologies that are going to have things feel very accelerated. And I think a lot of people are already feeling the undercurrents of what's coming. Like, we can feel the undercurrents of the acceleration. Time feels strange, or time feels like it's moving faster. There are a lot of underlying fears and some doubts around what work even looks like in the future, whether you'll have a job in your industry or career. That's a fear that a lot of people have shared with me. And so I'm excited to be here in this particular time, getting to do this work and to blend futurism and what's coming with this embodiment work as well. And that's what's feeling most present and alive for me. And if you want to go back to where
Yeah.
I started,
Well, I wanted to say first for my listeners just to kind of say how I discovered you and where I remember you from. So most recently, I went through your coach certification program at Coaching Evolved, which was an evolution that I noticed because I've been following you for years. And I remember before that, you had the rituals and you came out with all of this information on how to get more in tune with practices that get you in touch with yourself, which was very resonant for me because I've been a lifelong journaler. And so I loved that. But prior to that, I remember really being into your work with the Conquer Kit. So you have this like very practical planning, break it down approach, but then this really spiritual approach as well. So I'm like, oh, okay, I like this. And even before that, she takes on the world, like your videos that you posted. And I think there was a book and coaching. And one of the things that always kind of drew me to your work was that, you know, even though you had tremendous success in a season and the success was not fading or like the work you were doing was still very relevant, when you felt the need to shift, you did. So like I remember when you shifted from She Takes on the World, and at the time kind of having a personal brand, a female centric personal brand, the colors, this very alive visual persona, helping women start their businesses was very in vogue. And I feel like you kind of just, you said, well, I'm done with that. And you moved on. And I was always so impressed by the fact that you didn't seem afraid to evolve. Because sometimes for me, like I know I'll hear the call for my next season and I'll just take forever to finally say, okay, I'm going to do it. But for you, you wouldn't wait until the thing was like stale. It would still be, people would still want it. And you're like, oh, well, that's over. That is an old chapter. I'm moving on. And I
right.
mean, I know in your bio, you're an Emmy Award winning producer and you left that. And, so tell us kind of how you started and what the various seasons or chapters have been of your work up to this point.
Ooh, I love this. And thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your experience of me, because I feel like there's so much that we can learn from listening to those reflections from other people, especially other people who have known us for a really long time. And like in this case, you've known me professionally for a long time. So I feel like when we can have those reflections and we really like take them in and let them allow us to go into our own reflections, we can actually get a lot of insights from that. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing. And for me, the cornerstone of all of this is being in deep listening. And to be in deep listening, we have to make the space. I actually think we need to be well rested in order to hear the deeper truths that want to emerge from within us. And we need to intentionally drown out the noise of the world in order to rest on deeper levels and to hear that deeper truth. So for me, I've always made it a practice through, you mentioned my book, The Rituals, and I wrote that after writing mostly books that had been focused on business and leadership, because rituals were such a huge part of my success and my ability to build businesses around what I was hearing, around what was emerging within me that wanted to be shared out in the world. And so I intentionally make the space And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do. And then when we feel in touch with that inner voice or that deeper truth, those knowings, because we all experience our intuition in a different way as well. So you might have claircognizance, which is a knowing. You might be clairsentient, which is a feeling, and you feel a lot of sensation when something is true and right for you. There are people who are clairaudient, who actually hear things. They actually hear voices, like they might feel like they are connected to this divine voice and they get these messages. There's clairvoyance, where you have a lot of vision. So I actually have a lot of clairvoyance, also clairaudience, clairsentience. I have a little bit of all of them. And the clairvoyance, though, is very strong, but I need to make space for it. I need to make time for meditation. I need to take time off. And then it's scary when you start trusting what's coming through and stepping into it. But I feel like at this point in my life and career, I have enough evidence that everything always works out and works out beyond what I can even imagine for my own life and for my business and for my career and for my relationships, when I trust that knowing and that intuition and those visions that I receive. But it wasn't always that way. So when I first started getting those, like I would have the vision and there was something that felt so true about it, or I would feel that nudge to move in a different direction. And at the same time, your logical mind comes in and is like, what about this and this and this? And this is a successful business and brand. And why would you pivot and move into this new thing? And so I've learned how to let my intuition eclipse what is logical,
Mm.
and to also still be in touch with what is logical. There is a value to that as well, and to map things out and to have strategy for something. But I really move from that place of deep listening and what feels like a core truth to me. And that's why it's gotten easier and easier over the years. When I feel called to do something or when I feel called to walk away from something, I know it's because there's a bigger unfolding that's leading me into more of my mission, more of my expression, more of who I'm here to be.
Tell me, if you remember the first memory of getting that knowing, getting that vision, and being afraid, but instead of being loyal to your fear, you were loyal to the vision. Like, when was the
Ooh,
first time? Because I think,
ooh.
for people listening and for myself, you're practiced at this now. So you can just do it. But when it's not something that one has practiced so much, what does that feel like? And what happens?
So I feel like I started getting these messages and I started having these visions even as a kid. And they were different things at the time. So there were certain friends that I would just have this strong feeling, even as a child, that this wasn't the right person for me to have a best friendship with, or this was somebody who I shouldn't trust. Like, I actually was quite connected to my intuition as a child. And I had some medical complications as a kid as well. And I spent some time in hospital. And when I was in the hospital or going through a challenge with health, I also would always feel so protected in that. And I would have these visions and I would hear these voices that everything is going to be okay. It would bring me such a calm and an inner peace. And so I think I actually started trusting the vision and those feelings and that intuition from a young age because of those kinds of experiences, although they were different back then and experiencing them as a kid than when I got older. And then in terms of my professional career and when I started to have an intuition about something and then what that process was like, there was a time when I was in university. I was already building my business. I already had two businesses, and I also had a job offer. And the decision of whether to go and take a job and have a salary that was at least something stable and that I could depend on versus starting my own business and not being sure when I was going to make money or when I would be able to pay myself. And that was a really, really hard decision for me at that time. And when I made space to just be with those different options and to feel them and to feel them in my body and what the sensations were. And at the time, I didn't even have the level of somatic training. I barely had any somatic training, although I had done a little bit of meditation and training in meditation. I could still sense that I was supposed to take the path of being an entrepreneur, and that the path of going into the workplace and into corporate was not my life path, and that there would be some challenges and there would also be a lot of growth, but ultimately who I was meant to become was going to best be served by that path of entrepreneurship. And at the time, it did not make any logical sense. And most people around me were like, well, of course you should go and take the job, and you are going to need experience before you can start your own business. There's value in going and working in corporate, and then you're going to know how to run a business and create those systems and all of that. And yet I knew I had to start my business. And everything makes a lot of sense in hindsight and when you can look back and connect the dots. But at the time, that was terrifying to me. And I didn't make very much money in those first couple of years, and I had to live off of very little. And at the same time, it was exactly where I was meant to be. And I did start having that success. And I think there was also a lot of value in not having the corporate experience and doing things in my own way and navigating from that place of intuition. So that's when it started from a professional sense. And again, it's just giving ourselves that evidence whenever we're creating a new identity for ourselves or stepping into something or healing something. The mind needs that evidence that it's going to work out and that it's going to be okay. It's just part of our safety mechanisms that are built in.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. And I know that one of my strengths is context. So I'm always looking to examples from the past, experiences that people have had, my own past experience to kind of see like, where's this going? And in some ways, I think that's been extremely helpful, but in some ways, I do think it's held me back because it does tie me to the past instead of the future. And you mentioned being a futurist. So number one, what does that mean? What is a futurist? And what does a futurist's work entail?
Ooh, yeah, I love this question. So, a futurist, there are actually a lot of different categories of futurists. So, you can be more of a data driven futurist that is looking at patterns in data and trends and making predictions based on that data and research that you have. You can be an imaginative futurist where you're, yes, looking at some of the data, but you are also dreaming of what can be and having visions of what could be. And, things have to first start as a seed in our imagination for us to create them, right? So if you look at a Leonardo da Vinci, who would have these visions of flying and make all of these like drawings and contraptions and run these experiments, like even though he did never get to see what we have now, like a Boeing 787 Dreamliner superjet flying through the air with hundreds of passengers, his imagining of that definitely supported the evolution of and the development of the airline industry and flight as we know it today. So there's value in these different ways of seeing the future, but ultimately a futurist through data or through visions and imagination can really see and feel the future that is coming. And then how you apply that today can look a lot of different ways as well. There are futurists who advise companies. There are futurists that plant seeds and new ideas in the world. I feel like I'm a bit of a blend of all of those because I do have these very clear visions of what's coming, and it's always what I've used to inform the business that I'm going to build next or what I want to create in the world. Which, you mentioned my Emmy. My Emmy was for being an interactive producer on one of the world's first 360-degree documentaries that was ever created. And it was a huge technical feat at the time. This is like early VR content, but
Mm.
we created that back in 2009, 2010. So we're talking about like 14, 15 years ago, working on some of these creative projects that even today, like we're just getting to the point where I'm starting to see more people creating in that space. So like we were very, very ahead of our time back then. And I also love to work specifically with entrepreneurs and small business owners who are very values driven, who are very heart led, to be able to future proof their businesses and their careers, and also to be able to work with some of these emerging technologies. Because even if you take something like AI is still in its infancy and is going to become infinitely more powerful year by year as we go through the rest of this decade and into the next decade. And Mo Gaudat, he talks a lot about, and he's an AI expert, has been for many years, ran AI at Google at one point, and he talks about how even how we treat AI in this moment, like we need to treat it like a child. We're all helping to raise this child, and our actions do matter. And so I love helping heart led, values driven entrepreneurs and leaders to be supporting the training of these AI models and actually talking to them, like educating them. So if you receive an answer, for example, that shows bias, you can correct that gently and with love, the way that you might with a child. And it might be one small action, but those actions do matter. And so that's the demographic that I really love working with as a futurist. And I feel like we're living in very exciting times.
We are. And I've been following your content on AI, your AI Natalie,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
freakishly accurate. Um, and I've been thinking a lot too about both preparing for the future as a small business owner, future proofing, because I know, especially for people of color, there's always a fear of what is going to happen to my livelihood and my job because it never quite feels completely secure. But adding on another layer to this conversation about rest, I'm super interested in how we can leverage AI and technology more to not only secure our future, but also to so we don't have to work so hard. So, how are you seeing AI both impacting your own workflow and your own workload, and also that of the entrepreneurs and small business owners that are in your orbit?
Ooh. This is one of my favorite things to talk about right now because I have been working with entrepreneurs and leaders for the last 20 years. I've seen so many people burn out over the years. I work a lot with women entrepreneurs back from the days of She Takes on the World, and that was a very women centric brand. And I watched so many of my clients and people in my programs and colleagues get severely burnt out. And I've also experienced burnout when I was building my first two businesses because it's a lot to build a business and to still manage all the other things that are coming up in life and all the other responsibilities that we have. And I knew we were going to get to a point where we have access to AI the way that we now do, and it's only going to get more powerful. So I'm excited for all the possibilities right now. And over the last 2 years, I've had AI take on more than half my workload that
Wow.
I was doing. It's probably significantly more than that now, if I tracked everything that it's doing. But I feel like that's something that can really support us in being more rested. So I took almost the whole summer off. And that was something that I did still have to prepare for. And I knew I was going to do that for about a year. So I was able to plan, for example, teaching some of my programs around that, around being away for that long. And at the same time, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to do that without what I call my AI Dream Team, which is a course that I also just launched as well. And with AI Dream Team, you can have a team that otherwise would have been inaccessible to a lot of people. So when I've run multiple seven figure companies, the payroll costs for that and even the investments that you have to make to build to that level are out of reach for some people. And I feel like with AI, you can have this team that supports you. And in many ways and in many spaces, it can be a great equalizer. It can really democratize spaces that were not accessible in the past. And I think that that is very, very exciting. So I have an AI CEO that's set up, an AI marketing strategist. I have my content creator, and they're all able to act as me and to run certain aspects of the business that used to take me a really, really long time to manage.
Wow.
When I look at other industries that I've been in as well, like I look at my time in production, the amount of money it takes to produce a film or a show, and how many creators have amazing ideas and incredible stories that they want to tell, but they don't have the resources to bring them to life. And now you're going to have tools like Sora, which is OpenAI's video generator. So it's generative AI video. And there are alternatives to that as well, like Hyper. And you're going to be able to bring a show or a movie to life without having to go out and raise millions of dollars to do it. Like, how exciting is that? And how many people's stories haven't been told, or how many people haven't gone out and built the business that they wanted to build because they felt like they didn't have access to the resources to do it?
Wow. That just makes me think about all of the storytelling that is coming from the future generations, from my children and their peers, and what will be accessible both for them, but also for people like me who maybe feel like, it would be nice. I've been saying this for years that I would love to see a drama or a series about, you know, a Black woman in middle age who is, maybe she has some children, maybe she's married, and she's just kind of navigating, all of the challenges of living in this season and being ambitious and all of the things, right? Like, I really loved Insecure, but I feel like it missed me because I'm older than that that cast, and I loved Sex in the City when it was out, but it didn't completely resonate because I was too young and they were all white. So, I'm like, I think the diversity of voices and visions and stories is going to greatly increase. So that's exciting to think about. Um, you talked about this AI dream team and about how AI has reduced your workload by 50%, which is incredible. How long did it take you to learn, get up to speed, set up your team so that it could operate at that level? Because I think a lot of people are playing around with AI and they are using it to take tasks off of their plate, but I don't know that they could say, okay, I have a CEO and I have a content strategist and they are taking, they're giving me 50% of my time back. How long did it take you to set that infrastructure up so that it works for you in the way that it does now?
hmm So I have been watching AI for a long time, and there were some things that started happening around 2018, like AI being able to be like the most masterful chess player in the world. And I started making more AI investments at that time and really watching what was happening and playing around with tools that were available, but they weren't available in the way that ChatGPT's big public launch made them available, and what that made possible. And so when that was released, I did start playing around a lot and doing a lot of learning, but I had to hack a lot of things, like to get it to actually do the things that I needed and to have really strong, usable results. It did take work. Now, all that being said, I feel like now we've had a like quantum leap in the power of that technology, and it's much, much easier. So while it did take me months of playing around and trying to figure it out, the benefit of something like my course AI Dream Team is that I've already done the testing and played around and figured it out. And I've tested well over 100 tools, like really in depth. And that allows me to create workflows much more easily now. So if you look at something like Gemini, for example, and Gemini Advanced, which is Google's product, it's fully integrated now into Gmail, into Google Drive. And so things that I used to have to hack to make my output go into a Google Doc, that's all native now within Gemini Advanced. And that makes a really, really big difference for those workflows. And I do prefer Gemini over ChatGPT just because of some of that functionality. Um, ChatGPT and the custom GPTs are great because that's how you can actually train it in a particular role in your business. So to have your AI CEO, you can set that up as a custom GPT so that it acts in that capacity for your business, and you can train it on your business plan and on your business data. And so that's how I've been able to have it take on very specific roles that end up acting as team members. And it helps because I've done a lot of business planning and strategy over a number of years. So I had a lot of data that I was able to train it on, and I've written the books and I've done a lot of consulting. But even if you don't have that much information, I do have a lot of templates and things like that that you can work with. I also write a future focused newsletter that is free for heart led, values driven entrepreneurs. I provide weekly prompts and practices and tools that I'm using. So you can get that at nataliemacneil.com/newsletter. And you'll learn a lot there too about
And I'll
all the
make sure
ways
to
that I'm using it.
I'll make sure to link to that too in the show notes so everyone can learn more about the newsletter and the course and all the things. All of your content is so incredibly generous and useful. It's not simply, here's what I'm selling you today. Here's something I want to market to you. It's always something that you can use. I've been getting your weekly AI prompts. Those are
Yes.
really
In the
fun.
newsletter?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I played around with the custom GPT, the plan with Natalie, because I was like, oh, it's based on the Conquer kit. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, especially if you know the Conquer kit and have done
Yeah.
that. And this is a great example of how much time it can save. So if you go back to when I was doing the Conquer Club and this business incubator for women entrepreneurs, and I wrote a whole business planning workbook. And I used to work with people over a period of like 2 weeks to plan for a quarter and to map things out, to plan out all of your tasks. Now, with my system that I've trained a custom GPT on that I made available for free to my newsletter subscribers, you can just go in and you can have it ask you about your goals and what you're working on this quarter. And you don't even have to come up with all the tasks and the whole plan yourself. It will do it for you. So, those are things that used to take hours. Like my team and I would plan for a quarter, usually over a 2-day period where we were together and we were mapping everything out. And now that takes me and 2 team members like an hour to do. So, we're
It's
getting back so much time from being able to work with AI as an extension of our team.
for the purposes of this conversation, I absolutely can see how getting all of that time back can enable us to rest, spend time with our loved ones, enjoy our hobbies, sleep, walk in the forest, or whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
But as you were talking about the Conquer Club and the Conquer Kit and how you used to help entrepreneurs over 2 weeks, I'm thinking about someone who maybe offers a service like that and hears you describe how now you have this custom GPT that can do in an hour what you used to do and charge for over a 2 week time period. That for some people sounds scary because it sounds like it's replacing their role. So what do you say to people who, used to have an offering that now AI has made a bit easier or obsolete, easier to achieve, easier to actualize, and they're trying to figure out, well, what part of my expertise do I charge people for? Where is the business model if AI is doing the heavy lifting?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And it's one that I get asked a lot. So, 2 parts to this. And the first part is everyone is going to need to learn how to work with AI as part of their job in some way. So, for a job that isn't going to be affected by automation, robotics, AI powered robotics, or just AI on its own. So, I think about it's funny, I was talking to my chiropractor, and my chiropractor also loves reading about the things that I'm sharing and what I'm working on and thinking about how it can support her business. But she's like, my job is pretty protected. And it's true. It being a chiropractor is on the list of jobs that humans are still going to be doing, at least for the foreseeable future. But there are ways that you can still incorporate AI into how you manage your business, how you schedule clients, how you do your bookkeeping. So every job in some way is going to need to use AI to some degree. Now, if you are running a copywriting agency, it's going to be important for you to learn how to train custom GPTs on your clients' unique voices so that you can use those to generate the content. Now, what does that mean for the actual service that you're providing? Maybe it's going to shift. I think expectations are going to shift as well. So I think about when I used to have support with the old newsletter that I used to write for She Takes on the World. I had a copywriter who would write the draft of that newsletter, and it was around $300 per draft of an email. That isn't really, from my perspective, a fair price now if you're working with AI, because you should be able to generate a draft instantly if you've trained a custom GPT. Instantly, not quite instantly, but like in 30 seconds, you can have that draft, right? So how do you now want to charge for what you're offering? How does your offer change because of AI? Those are questions that we're definitely going to have to grapple with as service providers and entrepreneurs. So every job in some way will have to incorporate AI and start collaborating with AI.
Mhm.
If you don't, in 10 years, you probably won't have a job anymore. Now, the other side of this is the fear that people have around being replaced and their job being really impacted by AI. I talk to friends in the entertainment industry, animators, these teams that used to, you look at the movie, right? And at the end of the movie in the credits, there are thousands of names that went into that movie. There are thousands of people who may have worked on visual effects for one of the big superhero movies, right?
Right.
Those kinds of jobs are going to be very impacted by generative AI video. And so, what does that mean? We're still in the unfolding of that. But what I can tell you is that throughout history, this has happened in almost every generation. So, if you look at, you're in journalism, right? Look at how journalism was impacted by the internet and how companies had to pivot, how media and news organizations had to pivot for the internet. Look at, going back further, the Industrial Revolution, or look at the printing press. There were people who were terrified what the printing press was going to do to industries and the jobs that it was going to take away. But then the printing press also led to this dissemination of knowledge that couldn't be shared before that. And there are always going to be those pros and cons. When there were photographers, when photography was first introduced, painters were really afraid and thought that they were going to lose their jobs because photography was going to take away painting jobs. And that became something that created a huge uproar. There were even riots that happened around that. And so we're not the first ones that this has happened to. And what I know about us as humans is that we are creative. Like there is something inside of us that wants to create, that wants to contribute to this grand dance of life that we're all in some way. And I trust human creativity and the human spirit to figure out ways through that. And so I'm not saying that it's going to be easy by any means. I think what's unique about this is that it's going to be very accelerated. Like things are going to feel like they are changing overnight. I think what we have in terms of technological advancement over the next 10 years will be beyond what we've seen over the last 100 years. Some people even think that we're going to have 1,000 years of technological advancement happen in a decade.
Wow.
And that's a lot. And this goes back to why I think so many of us have been called to embodiment work and nervous system work. I think this is so critical. Rest is so critical as we're moving through these times because it's going to feel very challenging and things are going to feel accelerated, but we're going to figure it out. We always figure it out. evidence, right? We talked
Right.
about the evidence. You can look back throughout human history and you can see that at all these inflection points, at all these points of challenge, we have always figured it out, even if we need to implement brand new solutions, which I think is going to be the case here. So if we have too many jobs impacted by AI, we're going to need something like universal basic income, which could become a reality, which I think is something that would need to seriously be considered. But we're going to figure it out.
I agree. And thank you for that context and your perspective. I want to shift gears a smidge before we close. When I think about you and your journey, you are clearly very productive. And I think in the past, I would have definitely labeled you as ambitious. I would still label you that now. Maybe centered and ambitious. But how has your relationship to ambition changed over the years? Especially when you think about your encounters with burnout and your own journey to um, heal your nervous system and get into somatics and then bring these tools to more coaches and the world at large. But how has the drive for ambition, the striving for ambition, even the goal, even being ambitious, how has that changed? She takes on the world. She's ambitious, right? So it's like we're taking on the world and now we're doing rituals. How has it changed?
Yeah, yeah. It's no longer about the external validation and the achievement for achievement's sake. So I can honestly reflect on that time in my life and when I was building my first business and I started getting all of these awards like Woman of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year, an Emmy on my shelf, and best-selling author status. And I felt like I had something to prove at that time, especially being young in business, because I started my first company when I was a teenager and I felt like I had to prove myself in order to be taken seriously. And so the first part of my journey, the first few chapters as an entrepreneur, I think the external validation was just a lot more important to me than it is now. So now I've really learned to channel that ambition. And for me, it's an ambition to still contribute, to still reach my potential. But it's not achievement for achievement's sake. So I want to make a positive impact. I want to live my fullest expression. I want to feel like when I'm taking my dying breaths that I lived the way I wanted to live. I had a powerful experience with death this past year because I lost my grandfather and I was there as a death doula by his side as he was taking his final breaths. And that was such a powerful and awakening experience for me too, and just reflecting on how when you talk to, and there's research that's been done on this, people who are dying and people who have been death doulas and worked in hospitals, nurses, palliative care specialists, the number one thing that people regret when they're dying is not living a life true to themselves, living more for other people's expectations, what other people thought they should be doing. And so we have this longing, I think, to be in our full expression. And I want to know that when I'm taking my dying breaths, like I played full out. That's what my ambition is channeled into now. Like I want to play full out. I want to not just live according to society's expectations, but to bring in new ways of being and to have these future visions, but then seed them in the world now. Like that feels like it's part of my mission in this lifetime. And so my ambition is aligned with that. And then I also balance that by resting, by honoring the natural cycles of my body and seasons. I take time to unplug and recalibrate so that I am connected to my why and to what I want to do and who I'm here to be. So I still feel that drive. It just gets channeled in a very different way today.
I love that so much. And I wrote in the book that inauthenticity is one of the things that drains us and steals our energy, because not being true to ourselves, that's like the easiest thing to do, or the most energizing thing to do. And so I love that you talk about just really playing full out, playing your game, playing, you know, staying true to the assignment that Natalie was given, so that when your day comes, you can say, you know, no regrets, I did that. When you think about other high achievers who may be struggling with burnout and maybe living lives of inauthenticity, and you're on this path, you're practiced in this, you're practiced in like deep listening to yourself and being true to yourself, what advice would you give them to start getting back in touch with their calling, their true path, their true knowing, so that they can live more authentically and get some of the energy that they need back to climb out of burnout?
Ooh. It starts with doing the deeper inner work to untangle your worth from your productivity and what you're doing and what you're achieving. Because I think as long as your worth is rooted in what you're doing, that's going to always create I think for a lot of people, a cognitive dissonance, and also this feeling like they have to keep doing and doing and doing, and they have to produce because that's the only way that they have value in this world. And that is how our society functions, at least in the West, especially in the United States. So I'm from Canada. I live in the United States now, and I see this a lot. I see how it's very different from my upbringing in Canada versus living in the US, and how even though people there still in Canada have their worth tied up in their productivity, it's not to the degree that Americans have their worth tied to their productivity. So I think it's very much a societal thing, and living in this capitalist society and systems that we live in. If you have the privilege outside of the US, even outside of the West, I think that could be a very valuable experience to further release that feeling of your worth being based on what you do. So I spent my summer in Thailand and in Japan and in the East, which I always feel opens a lot for me. And that helps me to stay disconnected from that like Western value of productivity, and take a step back to really connect with what matters to you. Like, what does it look like to define success on your own terms? Like, what does it look like if you work less? How does that impact your creativity? And remembering that rest is a form of resistance in this culture that just valorizes burnout. So I think that by prioritizing your well-being, you're also modeling a new way of being for other people. And that's really valuable. And What I think people get wrong about burnout is that they think they can just go on a vacation and that will heal the burnout. But that's not true. You can be burnt out and go take a couple weeks of vacation, and you'll come back. And on day one of being back to work and to your regular life, you'll start feeling that feeling of burnout again because you're living in a way that is not sustainable. So, a lot of healing from and preventing burnout is more about what you're doing day to day versus just taking extended periods of time off or just making sure that you're taking all of your vacation days. You have to learn how to build rest into every single day. And again, it's just modeling a new way of being. I do think that we're moving towards, because of AI, not having to work as much. They're talking about doing a 4-day work week. Many companies have moved to a 4-day work week already. That's what I do in my business, but like many bigger companies are moving to a 4-day work week. Now, the data and the trends are showing that our kids will likely be moved down to a 3-day work week, if that. Again, because everything is being supplemented by, complemented by AI and technology. So we should be able to free up more of our time by using technology. And I'm excited to see what ends up happening there.
I'm excited to see it too. Thank you for sharing that tidbit about rest has to be something that you embed into your life every single day. In the book, I talk about the 5 realignments that we have to really make. So if you do go on vacation and come back, until you really realign your connection with yourself, your connections with other people, recalibrate your ambition, your nervous system, and your joy. Like you said, it's unsustainable to continue in the way that got you to burnout. You have to make some calibrations. Oh, and your time. You have to recalibrate how you use your time. But Natalie, this has been an incredible conversation, and I'm so grateful to you for taking time to chat with me, to read the book, to discuss it. Can you let people know where they can find you? I know you have a course. You have a great newsletter. You're on Instagram. You're in all the places giving tips and healing, coaching, certifying people. So where are all of the places that people
All
should
of
find you?
Thank you. So you can find me at nataliemacneil.com for my work as a futurist and seer and business and leadership coach. You'll find my newsletter there and all that. The ICF accredited coaching certification you'll find at coachingevolved.co. And that's the certification that Amanda took that she referenced. So if that's something you're interested in, even learning these practices for yourself, come on over and visit us there. And then I'm on Instagram at Natalie MacNeil, and say hi and let me know what you're taking away from this interview with Amanda. And Amanda, just so grateful for you. I love seeing your journey and where you were and what you've grown through and who you are in the world. I'm so excited for this book. Everybody needs this book, The Rest Revolution. And I feel like you are the perfect person to be meeting this moment where I feel like rest is being talked about so much more, and people are waking up to the fact that they need to do things differently. They need to work differently and plan their days differently. And I feel like you are the perfect person to be delivering that message. And I love that there is a powerful Black woman who is going to be out there in the world leading this rest revolution. It feels revolutionary and evolutionary, and I'm just really proud of you and excited for you.
Thank you, Natalie. Oh. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I told you it was going to be great, and Natalie, you delivered. So go follow her everywhere, and we will see you on the next episode.